I'm Dr. Milton Teske. Did you know that every day 150 diabetics have their legs amputated? Another 70 diabetics are going to start on dialysis treatments for the first time because of their renal failure. There are nearly 17 million diabetics in the United States, over 200 million diabetics worldwide, with nothing to look forward to but amputations, dialysis, pneumonias, impotence, retinopathy, blindness, neuropathy, heart attacks, and strokes. I'm a board-certified emergency physician and work on a regular basis in a busy emergency department. And there I get a chance to meet many diabetics on a regular basis. But I'm also a lecturer with Weimar Institute's New Start Lifestyle program, and there is good news for diabetics. You don't have to continue on this road to these complications. Diabetes is a reversible, very treatable condition. And by the time you finish this tape, you will understand the simple things you can do to walk away from these disease processes with all of these awful complications. And tonight, we're going to share with you the truth about diabetes. Before you go to bed tonight, you're going to understand diabetes clearer and simpler than you've ever heard it before. And understanding diabetes in that way is going to allow you to actually make sense of so many other things that we do here. And everything we're telling you about what to eat and what you can eat and shouldn't eat and the exercise and all of these things is going to come together. We're going to summarize it in 2 sentences we're going to give you through the program here tonight. But we're going to start right at the very beginning. Everybody knows diabetes has to do with what? Sugar. Yeah, your sugar. And the problem with diabetes is what? The sugar's too high. And we're going to put right here in the middle of our picture right here, this is our sugar. Now when sugar is circulating through the bloodstream, what do we call it? Glucose. Yeah, this is glucose. Blood sugar. Every time you're diabetics, if you prick your finger and get that little drop of blood out and stick it on the machine, you're measuring, how many molecules of glucose was in that drop of blood, so you know how high or low your sugar was. Now, we take in sugar in all kinds of forms. We take in glucose and sucrose and lactose and maltose. We take in starches, big, complex carbohydrates. But all of them, we break them down, and in the body, we're going to use them as glucose. And what do we use glucose for in the body? Why do we need it? Energy, yeah. Glucose is the energy that we run on. It's the fuel. It's what allows us to keep going. Now, we're going to, in our diagram here, put a great big cell. Cells, of course, are a lot bigger than glucose. This is just the edge of a huge, giant cell. And in this cell, we call it a mitochondria. This is where the sugar is going to go. This is where we're going to get the energy out of it. Because here, we're going to take this apart molecule by molecule to get the energy out of it to allow us to go ahead and do what the body needs. What does it do with the energy? Like it moves the muscles contract, goes down to the liver, big complex chemical factory, takes all kinds of energy to do those various chemical reactions to build the various things your body needs. It all takes energy input. What about your brain? Yeah, it takes a tremendous, we're using energy for every single neuron that's firing in there, every thought you think. They've done some studies, the Russians did these, on chess players. You know how much energy, they measured caloric energy consumption in the brain while they're concentrating on a chess tournament. I mean, now they're very serious about it. I mean, they're figuring move after move after move, and if he does this, I'll do that, and following every possible combination of what could... Intense amount of mental effort, and it's about the same caloric consumption as jogging. They're actually out there like jogging and the amount of calories they're burning with that type of thinking. Now, most of us aren't thinking that intensely, and so we need to do some jogging, and of course there's a lot of other things that exercise does for the body, but those are the type of things that energy is used for in the body, and it all comes from right here. Now, we mentioned it comes as carbohydrates. We often use a simple abbreviation, CHO, for carbohydrate. Stands for carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. That's how you make a carbohydrate. You've got these carbons arranged here in a ring, and then on those you add hydrogen and oxygen all the way around. And in these molecule bonds is a tremendous amount of energy stored. Where did the energy come from? From sunlight. Yeah, sunlight shines, and every single plant has got leaves. And these leaves are big solar collectors. They're taking that sunlight and they're storing it in chemical bonds, particularly the chemical bonds of carbohydrates. And so here we've got a glucose molecule. It's got all of this sunlight energy stored in these chemical bonds. Now we're going to take that. It's going to go right here inside this mitochondria, and in this mitochondria we are going to take that molecule apart, rip it atom by atom apart, and as we do so, we're going to get the energy out of there to use in the cell for whatever the cell needs to do. And as we start ripping it apart, these carbons and hydrogens and oxygens, it's really only one of these atoms that we use that has the high energy stored in it. But you know what it is? It's not the carbon. Now think about it for a minute. When you breathe in oxygen, what do you breathe out? Carbon dioxide. Yeah, the carbon is just coming off as a waste product. We don't need it, and we breathe it out and exhale it. What about the oxygen? Do we need oxygen? Yeah, we need oxygen, but we don't eat to get oxygen, do we? What do we do to get oxygen? Yeah, we breathe, and we need a lot of oxygen to breathe in, but we don't eat to get our oxygen. So it's not actually here that we're using it. It's actually right here. It's the hydrogen. And what we're doing with this very simple formula, hydrogen and an oxygen, and you know what it turns into? Yeah. What's that? Water. Yeah, H2O is water. So we did all of this just to make water? No. Where do we get our water from? We drink water, yes, and I'm sure we've been talking to you about drinking enough water and how many glasses and when to drink it and all these things. We don't eat to get our water, we drink to get our water. The purpose of this reaction is not to get water. This particular reaction releases a tremendous amount of energy. Right there. To go from here to here releases a tremendous amount of energy. A very famous piece of newsreel footage that you might have seen, the von Hindenburg. In the years right before World War II, the Germans became especially proficient at building these large airships, called them blimps or dirigibles. And it was just totally changing transatlantic travel from the steamships now to these large airships that just float silently and smoothly through the air, back and forth across the Atlantic. It was a tremendous thing. Everyone was excited about it. One day, as they were setting down in New York, something happened to the von Hindenburg, and I'm sure you've probably seen that very famous piece of newsreel footage. And there, within a very few moments of time, the hydrogen, they filled these large ships with hydrogen. The Germans at that time did not have the technologies to make helium. And so this hydrogen, within a few seconds, it combined with the oxygen in the atmosphere around it. It went up in a huge fireball of flame, tremendous amount of energy released there. And it's this very reaction right here. But it's not only a very powerful reaction, it's also a very clean reaction. I mean, think about it. Today, what do we put in the gas tank of our car? Well, we put in gasoline. What comes out the exhaust pipe? All kinds of poisonous, carbon monoxide and all kinds of toxic pollutant chemicals. What if we designed our cars to run on some hydrogen-oxygen fuel cell system? What would be coming out the exhaust pipe? Yeah, just a little steam and water be coming out the exhaust pipe right there. We totally solve all of our pollution problems with a very clean source of energy. And there's only one problem with this energy source, and that is with all of our technology, we still don't really know a safe way to carry on that reaction. I mean, can you imagine what happened when we have an automobile accident with that type of power available there and we make a collision? Another very famous piece of video footage you may have seen, I'm sure you've seen it over and over on TV, was a Space Shuttle Challenger. You know, that huge big tank there with liquid hydrogen, oxygen. When that went off, I mean, tremendous amount of power. And we don't really know a good, safe way to handle this tremendously powerful substances here. But God's a lot smarter than we are. Yeah. He knows a safe way to do it. And He's designed it, and He's put it right in the cell, right here in these mitochondria. Inside every cell. And there's not just one of these in your cell. There's actually thousands of these in every single cell of your body. And it gets the glucose circulated in your blood, comes out, goes into the cells, and in the cell there's thousands of these to take apart glucose molecules to release all the energy we need. Clean and totally safe. I have no fear if one of you should trip on that ramp tonight that you'll explode and bring the building down. Now, as we start to follow this, for the glucose to get inside the cell, God designed a very special way so that He could control that in our bodies. And there's actually special little doors that the glucose goes through. And we're going to draw one of these little doors here. Of course, it doesn't really look like this, but this will help us to understand it. So we're going to draw a little door here. And we'll even draw little hinges on our door here. We'll even draw a little doorknob here. Okay, there's our little door. And the sugar has to go through these little doors to get inside the cell. Now, if you start to look at this picture, you realize there's a problem here. Glucose doesn't have any hands. How is it going to open this door and get inside the cell? It can't. There's no way for glucose to open the door and get in the cell. So who comes to the rescue? Insulin, our good friend insulin. And so we're going to put insulin right here. We're going to draw him like a little guy here because he's got two hands. Insulin's got two hands, and one hand is just perfect to grab onto glucose, and the other hand is just perfect to reach over here and grab onto that doorknob. And that's what insulin does. With one hand he grabs a glucose molecule, with another one he grabs the doorknob, opens the door, puts the glucose in the cell. Then he goes and gets another, grabs another one, opens the door, puts him in the cell. And he keeps on grabbing glucose and putting it in the cells until the cell is full. Now, how does the cell tell you whether it's hungry or whether it's full? How does it tell you if it has a real need for more energy or whether its energy reserves are good and it doesn't need very much? Well, it does it with the doors. A cell that is low in energy, a cell that's hungry, a cell that wants more glucose so it can get more energy is going to tell the rest of the body that by making doors. He covers the surface of his cell membrane. There's not one door. There's actually thousands of these on the surface of a cell. And he just covers the cell with it so that any little sugar molecule floating around there, insulin comes by, wow, he's going to find a doorknob, open it up, and stick it in. It's going to be real easy to put sugar in. Now, the opposite is true. When that cell is full of glucose, he's got all he needs for his energy needs, how's he going to tell the rest of the body, I've got plenty, I don't need any more right now, take it to somebody else who needs it? Well, yeah, he takes in those doors and has very few doors on his surface because he has very low energy needs at that moment. Very important concept for us to understand as we go ahead with this. Now, where does insulin come from? Yes, it comes from the pancreas. Now, we're going to draw a little pancreas up here. Here in the pancreas now, there's some special cells that actually make the insulin. What are they called? Yeah, they're the islands of Langerhans, and in these little islands all through the pancreas, there's little cells called beta cells. And it's these special beta cells in the islands of Langerhans that actually make the insulin. They're neat little cells. They actually have taste buds in them. Did you know that? Yeah, they're constantly tasting your blood to see just how sweet it is. Minute by minute, they're tasting the blood to see how much sugar is in it. And if that sugar level starts getting higher and higher, what do? Well, they start secreting insulin and putting insulin out into your system. Yeah, so we'll draw a little line here to show. These beta cells are making this insulin. And, of course, if they make a lot of insulin, then what happens? Well, then the insulin starts grabbing all that sugar and putting it inside the cells. And, of course, then the cells here can use it to supply their energy needs. Kind of a neat little system the way it's all designed. Of course, we've simplified everything here, but this is normal. This is how your body was designed to run. Now, we're going to talk about diabetes. And in diabetes, we're going to talk about what went wrong with this system to cause this problem of diabetes, which can be quite devastating, not just in its simple disruption of the sugar, but in all the complications that come from it, right? I mean, what are the complications of diabetes? Amputations, dialysis, blindness, neuropathy, infections, and of course, the more serious, the strokes and the heart attacks. Yeah. 5 times higher risk of heart attacks with diabetes. Very much accelerates this process of atherosclerosis. It seems to come to everyone on an American-type diet, but with diabetes, we greatly accelerate and speed up that progress, rushing toward these fatal complications of this disease. Every single day, 150 diabetic legs are amputated because the blood supply has just been so cut off by this accelerated atherosclerosis that the leg is no longer alive and has to be amputated. It's a very devastating disease. One diabetic was telling me, I said, I'm just dying, one organ at a time. But the good news is that this disease process is reversible. You can actually do an about and walk away from it by simple lifestyle changes and get away from this disease process. Every single session here at New Start, we start seeing people turn around their diabetes. Some as simple as a few days seem to get control. More typically, most people start getting control at around the 3 and 4 week range. And of course, if you move on out in a few months, we get even more and more that get actually complete control off of all medications and insulin with normal sugars. Neuropathy, we've got documented research evidence that shows 80% complete reversal of neuropathy within 3 weeks. Yeah. Any of you that suffer from neuropathy, you know what I'm talking about, the doctors don't have anything for neuropathy. There's no medications, there's no treatment for the neuropathy. And yet, with simple New Start lifestyle changes, we're getting 80% results in 3 weeks. Fantastic, really, when you start thinking about it. But tonight, our job is to go back and look at the causes of diabetes so that we can understand this process and see why these things are working that way. And to do that, we're going to talk about diabetes as 2 different diseases. 2 totally different diseases. There's type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes. And these 2 diseases have nothing in common. The only thing they've got in common is that at the end of their process, your blood sugar level gets too high. Of course, once the blood sugar gets too high, then we can end up with all of these complications we're talking about. But they're totally different diseases. Some other names you may have heard. Type 1 diabetes is often called juvenile onset diabetes, childhood diabetes. And the type 2 diabetes is often called adult onset diabetes, the adult type of diabetes. These names aren't real accurate because we have people that are adults that can come down with type 1 diabetes. And with the accelerated bad diet among our young people today, and the junk food and the sedentary lifestyles, we are seeing this adult onset type 2 diabetes younger and younger. I see in the ER frequently teenagers that are coming down with this type of problem that used to only be seen decades later. A couple of other names you may have heard. Type 1 or juvenile onset diabetes is often referred to as insulin-dependent diabetes mellitus. You may have heard that name. The type 2 diabetes is often referred to as non-insulin dependent diabetes mellitus. Again, confusing names because these type 2 diabetics often end up in insulin. Did they turn into type 1? No. And so the scientific community has now gone and we call them type 1 and type 2. That's the official designations for these 2 Very different disease processes. And we're going to talk about them separately. We're going to talk first about the type 1 juvenile onset diabetes, the childhood diabetes. And in type 1 juvenile onset diabetes, the problem is right here. There's no insulin. The beta cells are non-functioning. They're not putting out insulin. Now just let's think about it for a minute. If we've got no insulin here, what's going to be happening? Now we eat a meal, we digest it, we get glucose in the bloodstream, right? But now we're not putting out any insulin. Can the glucose get inside the cells? Are these cells getting hungry? Yeah, these cells are starving to death. They're starving to death in a sea of sugar, and they can't get it in. And as this sugar backs up and builds up in the bloodstream, eventually the body's got to get rid of it, right? Where does it get rid of it? Well, it wants to get rid of it through the kidneys and the urine, but of course that takes water. You can't just, get rid of pure crystalline CNH cane sugar. No, it's got to be washed out in solution, and it takes a lot of water, and we end up dehydrating the body, trying to wash all this extra sugar out of it. And as we get dehydrated, what do we start doing? We get very thirsty. And what are the signs of diabetes? Yeah, they're just drinking lots of water and passing lots of urine. And of course, we go down and do a test, and we find out they're a diabetic. Of course, it can progress and become more serious than that. If this cell is over here is starving to death, now it's going to be flexible. It's not just going to say, well, I've got no sugar, I'm going to curl up and die. What's it going to do? Well, it's going to start looking at alternative sources to supply the energy it needs. Imagine, for an example, the wood stove over here, that this is the only way we have of surviving. This room, we're in the middle of a blizzard. It's freezing cold, way below zero, and the firewood to put in this is the only way we've got to stay warm and keep from freezing to death. Now, imagine we ran out of firewood, and we've got no firewood to put in the stove. What can we do to stay alive? What could we do here? Well, we could bust up the frame on this right here and burn it. That's wood, isn't it? We could start peeling down some of the parts of the building here, breaking down the frame, burning that. The piano here, we could start busting that up and burning it. It's pretty expensive fuel, though, isn't it? We're really, it's not the ideal way if we start tearing up the body system like that to supply the energy. But we could do that if we had to. And that's what's happening in the type 1 diabetic. Beyond those sources of wood, what else could we burn here? These cushions on the chairs here? Yeah, they would probably burn. We could start burning those. We could rip up this carpet. It would probably burn. Of course, we're going to start getting some problems now, aren't we? Yeah. What happens when you start putting that kind of stuff in your wood stove? Yes, we start getting toxic fumes. And as an ER doc, I can tell you some of these plastics and foams give off cyanide and all other kinds of very toxic chemicals. Well, in the body, we end up with some of the same kind of problems. And as we start burning alternative fuels here and things that weren't meant to be burned for fuel in ways they weren't meant to be burned, we start releasing toxic waste products. And they can start building up in the body. One of the most prominent is ketones. And as they build up in the body, it becomes very acidotic. And we have what they call diabetic ketoacidosis. Yeah, that's a very serious complication for type 1 diabetics. And as they get this diabetic ketoacidosis, and these things are building up, eventually we'd get to the point where the whole body would shut down. And this was before we had insulin. This was a fatal disease. People, children that got this didn't survive. Now, today, of course, we can go to the ER, and of course, we're going to give them some insulin, as well as IV fluids for their hydration, some medicine to stop the vomiting, and some things to correct the electrolyte disturbances. The main thing is we're going to give them some insulin so we can correct this problem so they can start putting sugar back in the cells and running everything normally. Now, before we go on any farther, let's take a look at this a little bit further. What happened up here? Malfunction. Yeah, the beta cells, they're dead and gone. They're not putting out insulin. But the question is, what happened to them? Who killed the beta cells? Who done it? What went wrong? What caused this problem right here? And We know in some cases it may be as a virus infection, where a virus has come in and specifically infected those cells and caused them to be destroyed. I once saw an individual, an adult, who was in an automobile accident, and their pancreas was badly injured, and as they recovered from their accident, we discovered they had become a type 1 diabetic. We had just, from the automobile accident, mechanically destroyed enough here they didn't have enough beta cells to function properly. But today, in the last few years, the research has shown that now by far the vast majority of these cases are caused by another culprit. Anybody know what it is? It's cow's milk. Yeah, cow's milk has a specific protein in it that we have now found is the culprit. Here's how it works. Now, in this case, there is a certain genetic predisposition. And in this particular case, certain children, it's inherited, passed down, actually produce on the surface of their beta cells a certain protein that is very similar in some ways to a certain protein that is found in cow's milk. And they've researched, they know exactly what protein it is. They call it the A1 protein. It's a certain bovine albumin produced in the milk. It's in about 80% of the dairy herds. And if they produce this particular protein, we get a serious problem up here. How does it work? Well, it has to do with your body's immune system. You know what your immune system is? We mentioned it the other day in some of the lectures. It's your security forces, right? This is what your military, the police, what protects you against the enemies, the things that are not supposed to be in you. Viruses, bacteria, cancer cells even. Cancer is actually a breakdown of your body's immune system now. And so we've got the immune system to protect us against those things. Well, a little baby, when it's born, has a very weak immune system without much ability to protect itself. Now, God has designed a unique way to take care of this little baby, and that's the baby's mother. Yeah, now mother's been living in baby's world for quite a while, hasn't she? And she's been exposed to the influenza and measles and mumps and all kinds of viruses and bacteria that the baby is likely to become exposed to. And mother has already fought those battles and has become immune to those diseases. What does it mean when you become immune to a disease? Well, you've been infected with it, and your body has recognized that as the enemy, and it's made special antibodies to attack that and destroy that particular virus or bacteria, right? These antibodies are actually special proteins, and these special proteins are specifically targeted for that one particular virus. And so in the future now, if mother is exposed to that virus again, what happens? The very first virus she might breathe in as she's, out traveling around, what happens to it? Well, the body immediately recognizes it. Yeah, we know who that is. We've already met him before. We fought a battle against him. And immediately he is targeted with a flood of antibodies and destroyed. Mother doesn't even know she was exposed to it. There was one virus and we killed it and it's gone. And so we would say she's immune to it. She's around people with chickenpox. She never gets chickenpox again. And so we would say she's become immune to it. Well, God has designed it so that mother takes all of her antibodies, packages them up in special little in the milk, and actually transfers these to the baby. So as the baby drinks mama's milk, the baby is now protected against everything that mom is protected against. But I want you to think about something that's happening here for a minute. These antibodies, they're proteins. Now what normally happens when we take proteins into our stomach? Well, we digest them, don't we? Yeah, we actually take them, we digest them. That means we cut them up all into little pieces, and then we absorb these little pieces. We call them amino acids. They're kind of like Lego bricks. You can put them together to make whatever you want. And so you take all of these little amino acids, you absorb them into your body, and then your body takes those little pieces and puts them together to make whatever proteins you need. Now, why doesn't the baby take these antibodies like any other protein and just chop them all up in pieces and absorb them and use them to make proteins? Well, God designed a very special way to accomplish that. And what happens when Mama is making her breast milk, she actually takes those proteins and packages them in special little packages that can't be digested. They go down to the stomach, and the stomach acids and enzymes can't get in there and digest them. And they go right through the stomach, down into the intestines, and they're not digested there. They go right through the intestinal wall, and they open up and they release their whole intact antibody proteins directly into baby's bloodstream. So we got whole intact antibodies specially packaged and released directly into the baby's bloodstream. They now circulate through the baby, and now the baby is protected against everything that Mama was immune to. I mean, isn't that fantastic how God designed that to work? And there's only one problem with it. You know what that problem is? The problem is we aren't baby cows. Think about that for a minute. You see, Mama cow is packaging all of her special proteins for her baby calf. But now we take the cow's milk and we give it to our children. Now what's happening? Well, we're just taking those whole intact cow proteins and dumping them, and we get whole intact cow proteins now going around in our children's bloodstream. Now, you think about that for a minute. What's going on there? As this child starts to grow and his immune system develops, a point comes when his body says, wait a minute, it doesn't belong here. That's cow protein. That's not human. So what does it do? Well, now it gets its immune system to start attacking it, and it starts making antibodies against cow proteins. We would say he's become allergic to dairy products. Yeah. The most common allergy in America today, by a wide margin, is allergy to dairy products. And it's for this very reason. It's very easy to get whole, intact proteins directly into the bloodstream so that we can become immune to them and start attacking them. Now, here's the problem. Remember I said some children are going to inherit and make special proteins on their beta cells that are very similar to a certain cow protein? Well, as we become allergic to that certain cow protein, we now have a case of mistaken identity, of destruction by friendly fire. And the antibodies that the body is making against these cow proteins can't tell the difference, and they start attacking the beta cells. And we end up destroying the beta cells, and now this child is a type 1 diabetic. Now, there's some good news. In the last couple of years, they have done some research, and they have found if we can catch these children in the first few months after their diagnosis, there's a period apparently where these beta cells are mortally wounded, but they're not yet dead. If we get them to the ER on time, we can save their life. We can resuscitate them and turn this thing around. And what do? It's very simple. Niacinamide and get them off of the dairy products. Yeah. Those two simple modalities right there, get them off of dairy products 100%, so we're not stimulating this immune response anymore, and put them on niacinamide. I'm not sure exactly how that works, but it does something in the system, and together they are getting a 90% reversal rate in these children. Now you think about that, 90% reversal rate, you know, to save these children a lifetime of insulin injections, not to mention all of the diabetic complications down the road. Yeah, very, very powerful modality. I mean, you think about it, and maybe you don't have type 1 diabetes, or even somebody in your family doesn't. But as you go home, maybe next month, next year, a neighbor, a relative, their niece, a friend, someone in your church, you hear someone, oh, they just came down, their child was diagnosed with diabetes. You have right here in your hand now a key to really do a tremendous amount of healing benefit for that child by just sharing this simple information with them. Well, what about the ones that have already been type 1 diabetic for a long period of time? One of the things we know is we come back and eat a simple whole plant food balanced diet. It's very much easier to control the blood sugar levels, and with a good exercise level we can really reduce insulin doses. There's been one thing that has happened here at Weimar that we were shocked, and nobody actually expected in these type 1 diabetics. We have found that about a 10% complete reversal rate. Now, that means there's about 90% that are still going to be on their insulin, but we're getting about 10% that are actually completely off of all of their insulin with normal sugars, with just a New Start diet and exercise. I mean, that is fantastic when you start to think about what's happening there. And of course, these other 90% with a good diet and exercise program are really getting their diabetes under good control and doing everything they can to prevent these complications that are coming down the road. One very interesting fact that you can do some research, plot this out. If you go around the world and you plot the various countries and the incidence of type 1 diabetes, and then correlate that by plotting it against the per capita consumption of dairy products in that country, you know what you find? A direct correlation. Yeah, those countries which have almost no access to dairy products have almost no type 1 diabetes. As the per capita consumption of dairy products increases, so does the incidence of type 1 diabetes, till we get to countries like America that have very high per capita consumption of dairy products and a very high incidence of the type 1 diabetes. You know what country's the highest? Anybody again? It's Finland. Finland is actually even higher than the U.S. Although it's pretty close up there, but yeah, they have the highest per capita consumption of dairy products and also the highest incidence of type 1 diabetes there. Okay, now we've covered type 1 diabetes and what we can do about it and how we can benefit it. We're now going to switch gears and talk about a totally different disease, type 2 diabetes. This is the adult onset diabetes and by far the most common. In the United States, probably about 95% of diabetics are of the type 2 adult onset type diabetes. And it can come anywhere from, like I said, we're starting to get in teenage years on up at any point in life. There is probably a genetic component in there. And now as we're studying the genome, we're even identifying and actually finding exactly what some of those genetic components are. But all of these genetic components, I like to tell people the genetic components are like a loaded gun. Now you think about a loaded gun for a minute. A loaded gun is not going to hurt anybody if you don't pull the trigger, right? Yeah, if you just leave it sitting there on the table and you don't touch it and don't pull the trigger, nobody gets hurt. Of course, now, if you reach over there and pull the trigger, then you can get hurt with it. You know, some people might say, well, you know, look, my neighbor down the street, he is doesn't eat right, he doesn't exercise. Why didn't he get diabetes? How come I did? Well, we're all made differently. He may not have the same loaded gun sitting on his table that you did. But regardless of what loaded guns you've got sitting there, by controlling the lifestyle, we can stay away from pulling the trigger. And of course, the good news is, even if that trigger's been pulled and we've come down with adult diabetes, we can actually do an about-face by changing the lifestyle and moving on. Type 2 diabetes is a lifestyle disease. Like hypertension is a lifestyle disease, and atherosclerosis and arthritis. These diseases which seem to be the major cause of disability in the United States. And when we talk about a lifestyle disease, we mean it's a disease that is brought on and caused by the lifestyle we live here in Western culture. And what is our lifestyle that causes this disease? What is it that's bringing it on? Yeah, it's the food. Yeah, we have all of this food, lots of it, high in calories, high in fat, lots of it. We're just overloaded with food. And of course, to go along with this overload of food, what? We've got a very sedentary lifestyle. Yeah, we're not exercising, walking, working. Most of us, we drive, we use machine, we sit in the car, we do everything at home, we sit on the couch. We've got a very sedentary lifestyle where we do very little physical exercise. And you put those two together, and we've got this process we call type 2 diabetes coming on us. One of the factors has to do particularly with this calorie overload of diet. And I told you I was going to give you 2 sentences. The first sentence has to do with diet. And they may have already given you this in some of the other lectures, but we're going to give it to you again. If you wanted to summarize this diet in one sentence, what would it be? Whole plant foods eaten whole. Yeah. If you think about that sentence for a minute, you've got there the essence. Any question you've got about, well, should I eat that? Is it okay to eat this? If you think about this one sentence, you can probably figure out the answer to that. Now, as you look at that sentence, of course, one of the things you notice in this sentence, it said plant foods. That means we don't eat animal food. In other words, if it has legs or it has wings or fins, if it's got a face or it has a mother, we don't eat it, right? Well, what do we eat? Plants, what's a plant? A plant has leaves and stems and roots and makes seeds. Yeah, those are plants. So that is one of the first steps in putting the diet together. But you'll notice as we started talking about that, we're not only talking about plants, twice we say this, whole plant foods eaten whole. What is this emphasis on whole plant foods? Yeah, we can take something really good that God created, and we can take it to the factory, and we can ruin it and make it actually very unhealthy and problematic for the body. Let's take, for example, corn. You know what sweet corn is? I mean, do you like sweet corn? It's delicious, isn't it? I mean, how many ears of sweet corn do you eat at a meal? Several. You know, at our table, when sweet corn's in season, I mean, there's a huge pile of corn cobs on the table by the end of the meal. But now we can take something really good that has all kinds of good things in it that God made, and we can take corn to a factory to make corn oil out of it. Now, when we take corn to the factory to make corn oil out of it, we take out all of the fiber, the bulk, the minerals, the vitamins, and express out just one chemical, the oil. In concentrated form, everything else is taken away and gotten rid of. And we take this one thing, and then we usually heat it up to high temperatures, this cracking process that even distorts it and the molecules in different shapes, making them more unhealthy. And of course, it's exposed to oxygen, so we're getting oxygen-free radical damage on the oil. And then we take this one chemical and put it back into the body in excess. When I say excess, you know how many years of corn it takes to make 1 tablespoon of oil? Anybody know? It takes about 15 years of corn to make 1 tablespoon of Mazola corn oil or margarine. Now think about that for a minute. How easy is it to eat a tablespoon of oil or margarine at a meal? I mean 2 or 3, pretty easy, right? Easily. But now you realize you're already up to 45 ears of corn. Now think about that. Did you ever eat 45 ears of corn at a meal? No, with your 3 tablespoons of oil or margarine, we're up to already 45 ears of corn. Do you see how we're getting way more in the body than God ever designed it to handle? Yeah. With this refining of products, that's what's happening. We do the same thing with sugar. Do you know how many feet of sugar cane it takes to make 1 candy bar? It takes about 30. About 30 feet of sugar cane to make a candy bar. Yeah, it takes about 30 feet of sugar cane to make the candy bar. Now, think about that for a minute. But one time I went down to Jamaica, and I took my daughter, Shelley. She was about 8 years old at the time. She had never seen sugar cane before in her life. And so between some of the meetings, we went down to the local market there, and there was a guy selling sugar cane. So we bought a piece of sugar cane, and he takes his big old machete knife, and he cuts the outside off of that nice white in the middle, and she bit into that. Wow, you should have seen her face light up. That was good, sweet stuff. Oh, she was loving that, chewing away on that sugar cane. For about half an hour, she was just chewing away on that sugar cane. But about a half an hour later, I noticed she had put it down. And I said, well, are you done already? Oh, yeah, I'm done. I mean, how much sugar cane can you eat at a time, right? How long would it take you to eat 30 feet of sugar cane? If you worked on it every single day, how long would it take you? I mean, at least a month. You know, how long does it take to eat a candy bar or 2 candy bars? Yeah, you see how we're getting way more sugar? And, of course, not to mention, again, all of the vitamins and minerals and fiber and everything that's been taken out of it. So this is part of the problem with the typical American diet is these high amount of refined products, concentrating the calories, putting a tremendous load on our system that was never designed to be there in nature. Now, let's just take a minute and try to see how does this particular problem cause diabetes here. And just imagine, for illustration right here, you've had a great big meal in the evening, all kinds of rich, high-calorie foods. And after supper, what do? We go to the living room, we sit on the couch, flick on the TV, and get out the clicker. And as that meal begins to digest, what happens? Well, we start putting a load of glucose, among other things, into the bloodstream, right? And as that blood sugar rises, the pancreas puts out its insulin. And so the insulin grabs the sugar and it goes down to start putting it in the cells. But now as it comes down to the muscles in the legs right here, I say, wait a minute. We haven't needed any earlier today, and we're certainly not going anywhere tonight. We don't need any more. Yeah, he says, we don't need any more. Why don't you, maybe the finger muscle is going to need some up there to run the TV clicker. You know, but how much can the finger muscle use? Not too much. Now, how did that cell tell you that he didn't need any more sugar tonight? Remember? Yeah, they start taking away those doors, yeah. And over a period of time, months, years, days, we get to the point where these cells, they know what's going on, they know the game plan, they say we don't need more, and they've got all those doors gone before you even got around. I mean, you eat the meal and they say, no way, there's no doors here. We don't need any more. We know we're not going to need any. Now we've got a problem, right? We've got plenty of sugar, plenty of insulin, but no doors to go to. And it's starting to back up in the bloodstream. Well, there is another place we can go. Over here in the liver says, you know, I don't need any more tonight either, but we might need some tomorrow. I mean, what if we had a hypoglycemic reaction? I know how to save it for tomorrow. We can make glycogen. You know how you make preserves? You know, you can food and you save it for another day. Well, the liver does that with glucose. It takes a glucose molecule and it sticks another one on, and sticks another one on, and sticks another one on, until it makes this huge clump of hundreds of glucose molecules all crammed together. We call it glycogen. Have you heard of glycogen? That's how cells store glucose, is glycogen. And so they start doing it. Of course, the next day he stores some more, and the next day he stores some more. Well, pretty soon, what happens to the pantry? Yeah, pretty soon the pantry is completely full. Then pretty soon he starts putting it under the couch and under the bed. And pretty soon those are full too, and they're stacking on top of everything, and it's on the floor, and pretty soon you can't walk through the room, and pretty soon that cell is stuffed with glycogen. You should see it under the microscope. You can just see those little, you can actually see them, just packed full of glycogen. And when it gets to that point, it finally comes to the point and says, you know, I just can't hold any more in here. And how does it tell the rest of the body that? Same way. Starts taking in all of his doors. Now we've got a serious problem. Now what is the insulin going to do with all that glucose we keep loading in with each meal? There's one more place to go. You know where that is? The fat cells. Yeah, those are the softies. They're the good guys. They say, come on in. You know, we may not need it tomorrow, but you might need it next year. You know, there could be a famine. Maybe you'll end up in a concentration camp. This, you know, we got to save this stuff. We got to conserve it. And they know a better way to do it. Did you know fat is twice as efficient of storing energy? Yeah, you can get twice as much energy in the same gram for gram as you can with carbohydrates like glucose or glycogen. So they start making it down to fat, storing it up for next year. And so the cell, the fat cell, as it starts to store that, what happens to that fat cell? It starts swelling up. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger, right? Of course, what happens to us? Yeah, we start getting bigger and bigger too, don't we, as all our fat cells fill up. But you know, a fat cell can only stretch so far. You know, and when a fat cell gets as full as it can get, you know, he says, you know, I'd love to take some more, but I just can't squeeze another one in. You know, how does he say that? Yeah, he starts taking in all of his doors. Now, now you see what's happening here? We're getting a serious problem in the body. We got no doors anywhere to go to. And what happens to the blood? The sugar is backing up in the bloodstream. Our sugar levels are getting higher. And like the type 1 diabetic now, we've got to dehydrate the body to use up enough water to wash it out of the system through the kidneys. And so you get the symptoms, you go to the doctor, he does some tests, and he comes back with the test, and he tells you your diagnosis. You are a diabetic. You have diabetes. Now, he probably told you something else that day. He probably told you something along the line that, you know, you're a diabetic. You just need to accept the fact you're always going to be a diabetic, and every day for the rest of your life you're going to have to take your medication. Maybe in the future we're even going to have to put you on insulin. You're just going to have to accept that fact. You've got diabetes, and you're going to have to take your medicine every day. Right? Yeah, he probably told you something along that line. And you know what? Well, he was right. If you're going to continue the same lifestyle that brought on this disease process. But the good news is, if you're willing to make a change in your lifestyle, you can actually, literally, walk away from this disease process. You don't have to stay in that condition if you're willing to make the lifestyle change that caused it. Now, there was probably something else he did for you that first day. And what was that? Probably got out of the prescription pad, and he wrote a prescription. Diabetes, micronase, gluburide, liptazide. You know the medicines I'm talking about. The blood sugar lowering medicines, right? You know how those medicines work? They go right up here to the pancreas, and they go right to the beta cells, and they stimulate them to make more insulin. I mean, they get out a whip, and they just start whipping those cells, trying to push out more insulin. Now, you think about this picture a minute. We didn't have a lack of insulin, did we? Where was the problem? There was no doors. Well, now, why are we whipping more insulin out here? Well, it works like this. If you get enough insulin running around, you can find the last few doors on these cells that they hadn't pulled in yet, and you can start stuffing more sugar through those doors. And so we can get our sugar level back down to normal by stuffing some extra sugar in these doors the cells didn't realize they had left out there. And that works for a while. But what does the cell say? Wait a minute, I didn't expect all this sugar to come in here. And so what does he do? Well, let's get those last doors out of here so that we don't get any more too much sugar in here. You know, and so what does the doctor do? Well, we need to increase your medicine. Yeah, we got to up your medicine. And so we whip some more insulin out. And boy, we get this insulin running around looking for every single last door. You know, and the cell is saying, no way, I don't want any more. And all the insulin says, oh, yes, you do. Take another one. Take another one. And we're just forcing more and more sugar into these cells that are saying, no way, we're full. We don't want any more. I mean, do you see the problem here with this particular approach? Of course, there comes the point where, you know, as high as we can go, we just can't seem to whip enough insulin out to actually keep our sugar levels down, because these cells are just doing everything they can to get those extra doors out of there. And the day finally comes and the doctor says to you something like, you know, I think you've become resistant to your medications. We're going to have to put you on insulin. Yeah. And that's the next step in the progression. So we go from the medications, now we're on insulin. You see, in other words, we can't whip enough out of the pancreas, we just start injecting it. And how much do we inject? Well, I mean, in type 1 diabetes, we would go up to about 40 units. That's a normal adult replacement. What about type 2 diabetes? 40, 60, 80, 100, 120, 200, 300. I mean, you know, there's almost no limit. We could just pour it in by the gallon, because the problem wasn't a lack of insulin. What's the problem? There's no doors. Yeah. Now, as you start to look at this picture and think about it, it should become pretty obvious to you, what is the solution to our problem? Yeah, we need more doors. And you know what? We've got no door pills. And we can't inject doors. There's only one place we can get doors. Where's that? The cells have got to make doors. Yeah, they've got back in their genetic code here in the nucleus the instructions for making doors, and they're quite capable of making doors. They decided not to make doors. So now we've got to convince this cell to change his mind and make more doors. Now, how are we going to make a cell want to make more doors? Yeah, well, we've got to make the cells hungry. What do hungry cells do? Yeah, they make doors. Remember our type 1 diabetic? How many doors did he make? Oh, he was starving. He was making thousands of doors. You want to make doors, we got to make the cells hungry. And now it comes back to the New Start answer. How do you make a cell hungry? Yeah, walk, 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 walk. Now, you've been here a week. I'm sure you have heard that so much that it's sounding like, you know, some bird. Just walk, 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 walk. Everywhere you go, somebody is telling you walk, 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 walk. They're taking you out walking. Everything is focusing on walking. But can you begin to see in this picture here in diabetes why walk, 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 walking is so important? Yeah, no diet in the world will reverse diabetes without exercise. We've actually got to come back and make those cells hungry by walk, 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 walking. And that's the second sentence, by the way. Walk, 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 walk. That's it. You put those two together, whole plant foods eaten whole, walk, 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 and you have got the key to reversing diabetes right there. Simple, clear. Jesus said, you'll know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Now you know the truth. As you've listened to the preceding lecture, you've probably been impressed with the powerful simplicity of these principles for improving health. Just walk, walk, eat plants, drink water, breathe air. It's really very simple. No expensive equipment required, no drugs, no supplements to buy. You could do it easily at home. But to achieve really dramatic improvement in your health is going to require some dramatic lifestyle changes. And the culture around us is always not very helpful to that. And you probably have some habits that are deeply ingrained that are going to be hard to break. It'd be nice to have a place where someone could help you do that. Some people would really prefer to do that in a safe environment with physician supervision. Weimar Institute has developed their New Start lifestyle program to provide just such a service for those who would like that help. Located in a beautiful mountain setting with miles of walking trails, clear, fresh air to breathe, and a delicious gourmet cafeteria where you can go for all of your meals. And not only do they cook all of the food and provide all the meals for you, but every day there is a cooking class where you will learn how to cook these foods yourself, and a hands-on laboratory where you'll actually practice it so that when you go home you'll know how to prepare these healthy foods that can change your life. It's a very stress-free, restful environment, and hydrotherapy and massage treatments are part of the regular program. But most important of all is going to be that close physician supervision that you're going to receive. A whole team of dedicated Christian physicians, MDs, licensed practicing real doctors, practicing real medicine, are going to be following your progress very closely. An extensive history and physical exam when you arrive, a laboratory examination with all of the various blood tests, as well as they're going to take a carotid artery ultrasound, where they're going to look exactly at the thickness of your arteries. A 12-lead electrocardiogram treadmill exam will be an important part of your evaluation here, where they will know exactly how your heart responds to various levels of exercise, so they'll know just how safely you can exercise. Every few days you'll have a repeat follow-up visit with your physician, where they will go over your values, your progress, your medications, and tell you just when to reduce doses on certain medications, when it's safe to drop a certain medication. And there'll be a follow-up EKG, treadmill, and laboratory assessments when you complete the program to document exactly how much progress you have made during the time here. It's an environment where you're going to have the help of an entire medical team to make this transition very safely. I strongly recommend it to you.